1 in 4 adults in the United States had a somewhat to very unfavorable opinion about Latter-day Saints.
I actually think it's great.
You do?
We can't do much about it. The doctrine and the history are what they are, and they stand on their own. They're either true and good and right, or they're not.
Kristen Walker-Smith, co-host of the 1 Minute Scripture Study podcast, creator of the Start Here Study YouTube videos, a Deseret Book Masterclass teacher, and best-selling author. But what do you think about the accusation that sometimes we have a persecution complex?
I think if we do, we need to get over it. We've got to wake up in the morning ready to disturb and annoy Satan, and to do it even if it scares us.
So what can Latter-day Saints do to get to that spot where they are confident and secure in their beliefs when people disagree with them or come at them? So, I want to just drop a bomb here right at the beginning.
Drop it.
It's a rather disturbing statistic that is kind of gonna be the basis for our discussion here. So, in 2022, PEW Research did a survey, and they were asking people about their opinions about different faith groups, right?
Right.
25%, 1 in 4 adults in the United States had a somewhat to very unfavorable opinion about Latter-day Saints.
Oh, that hurts.
Hurts a little bit.
Yeah.
Then 59% of people that were surveyed didn't have a strong opinion in either direction. And then only 15% had a very to somewhat favorable opinion of
Were those
Latter-day
all
Saints.
members of the church?
I really, really hope not.
Okay.
But that 15% positive opinion, that was the smallest positive percentage of all of the traditions that they surveyed.
Really?
It came in underneath atheism and Islam and Latter-day Saints right there at the bottom. So that is kind of the reality that Latter-day Saints are facing. Like,
right.
Whether we like it or not, 1 in 4 adults don't have a great opinion of us. Why do you think that is?
Was there a follow-up question that asked them why they don't like?
Not that I saw.
Okay.
I'm picking your brain.
I think I've seen this as well. And so that makes it hard because no one was asked why.
Yeah. We're speculating.
Right. We're in speculation land right now. But my guess is that it's a two-part problem. Either these people have met members and had a negative experience. Maybe, and you're aware of this, maybe somebody befriended a non-member, a friend, and then when they found out they weren't interested in the gospel, they dropped the friendship. Or they live in an area that has a high population of members and they feel like the members are cliquey, which I'm sure it looks that way many times because we make lots of good friends in church and feel like we don't need any more, so we don't get out into the community. Or they just met a member who was rude, like who wasn't a nice person. And so probably, I'm guessing there's one part that is social, but the other part of it that we really can't do anything about, my guess is that a lot of it just has to do with our doctrine and our history. And my guess is that it's other Christians who have the biggest problem with our doctrine and history. The Jews don't care that Jesus came to Joseph Smith because they don't believe in Jesus anyway. But other Christians probably look at our doctrine and our history and think either it's weird or that we're elitist because we say we have the priesthood authority. We are the ones who have the authority in matters of eternity. And your baptism is nice, but it doesn't have effect after this life. And as far as that goes, we can't do much about it. The doctrine and the history are what they are, and they stand on their own. They're either true and good and right, or they're not. And so I think the answer to that is, first, the social part, don't be a jerk, right? Like be a nice person so that people don't have issues with members because they've met one who was rude. And then the second part where, it relates to people think our doctrine is weird, get used to people thinking your doctrine's weird. It's not going to change. And Jesus, his doctrine wasn't very popular, so why should we expect ours to be?
Another thing I want to bring up is kind of a damned if you do, damned if you don't situation.
We're getting hellfire here.
We are.
Yeah.
We're sometimes accused of having a persecution complex.
Yeah.
As Latter-day Saints, where we kind of, everybody hates us, woe is us, we're playing the victim type of thing. Do you think that there's some truth to that? I mean, we've seen the data now, like 25% of people don't like us.
Yes.
But what do you think about the accusation that sometimes we have a persecution complex?
I think if we do, we need to get over it.
Yeah,
Jesus absolutely was persecuted, but he didn't go around complaining about it.
that's a good point.
He was hated by so many people. He had the smallest group of followers. If you look at who was at the bottom of the cross when he was being persecuted in the worst way possible, how many people were actually there for him? And did he complain? And so I just think if we're trying to be like the Savior, if we're thinking celestial, then persecution isn't our biggest problem. It's not our job to control whether or not people persecute us. Our job is just to try and be like Jesus, who didn't let persecution get in his way.
What tips would you have for people who are trying to get to that point where they feel okay with letting a comment section go?
One of the things that I've been doing ever since my freshman year of college, I still remember sitting in Todd, if you're listening, you changed my life, Todd Parker's Book of Mormon class. And a story was told about Elder Marion D. Hanks. And this is a while ago, if we're talking about Marion D. Hanks. But one day Marion is, and I'm going to say Elder Hanks. He and I are not best friends. I can't call him Marion. So one day Elder Hanks is driving home from work in Salt Lake City. And you can imagine what his days are like. He's working with the First Presidency. He's working with the Quorum of the 12. This has got to be the coolest, most uplifting job ever. Even if it's stressful, you're dealing with amazing, good people. And as he's driving home, he approaches a red light and there's a car in front of him and his foot accidentally slips off of the brake onto the gas and he runs into the car in front of him. And once he kind of gets his bearings together, he decides, well, I need to get out of the car and talk to this person. And so he's about to leave the car when he sees someone get out of the car in front of him. And it is a mountain of a man, a giant. And this man angrily approaches his car and Elder Hanks makes the wise decision not to get out. And for the next 5 minutes, he rips into Elder Hanks, just rips him apart, uses vile, vulgar language that Elder Hanks hasn't heard since he was in military service. And it goes on for 5 minutes. And then the man gets back into his car, drives away, and Elder Hanks is left thinking, this menace is on the streets of Salt Lake City. Someone needs to arrest this man. He is a danger. Now, 2 weeks go by. And Elder Hanks is sitting in a state conference and he is up on the stand and he's looking at all these beautiful people, wonderful, righteous people. And then he sees a face he recognizes.
Oh,
it's
no.
the man who had yelled at him for 5 minutes on the streets of Salt Lake City. And at the end of the meeting, the man approaches him. And surprisingly, Elder Hanks doesn't run. He just stands there, waits for the man to approach. And that man humbly says, I need to talk to you. And Elder Hanks says, okay. And so they go find a private room and are able to speak. And the man starts to apologize. And he tells Elder Hanks, as I was sitting in my car on that day 2 weeks ago, I was in a state of depression and fear and anger. I had just left the hospital where my wife had died. And I was driving on my way home to tell our 4 little children that their mother was dead. And as he's filled with all of that anger and all that frustration and all that sadness, that is when Elder Hanks hits his car. And so all of those feelings, all those emotions come out of him and he unleashes them. He unleashes them on Elder Hanks. And Elder Hanks says, if there had been a crack in the wall at that moment, I would have crawled into it. He said, I had made a man an offender for the word. He had no idea what this man's story was and had judged him based on those 5 minutes of interaction with him. And most of us would have thought justly so. And ever since hearing that story, I have asked myself, what's their story? Now, I don't suggest this for anyone who is dealing with someone who is truly abusive towards them. But I would say in general, in our life interactions, what is the story behind why someone is acting that way? I use this all of the time in the car, especially when I'm driving on the freeway in Utah. And I ask myself, what's their story? Why are they driving that way? I will tell you, there are so many men driving their pregnant wives in labor to the hospital in Utah. Okay. But it is the most amazing thing because it's impossible to have compassion for people because we don't know their stories. And so when someone is being such a jerk in the comment section and I ask myself, what's their story? I don't know. Did they just get fired from their job? Did they find out their wife has cancer? Did their favorite dog just die? Were they bullied as a child? I don't know. But I make up those stories and it allows me to have a small measure of compassion towards people, even in the comment section, who are just being so rude and so ungrateful for the work that you do, that I do as a creator to try and put out good in the world, and they just tear it down. Mm-hmm. So that has been the most helpful for me.
In my life, I paralleling that story, there was a critic of the church who who had made a really aggressive video about the church
Mm.
and was saying some things that weren't exactly true. And this was it wasn't a new video. It was a pretty old video that I was
Yeah.
responding to. But I responded to it and we published the video. And then I learned that the critic who I was responding to, actually died
Oh.
sometime earlier, some months earlier.
Mm.
And it's amazing how fast just a little bit of information
Mhm.
can just stop you in your tracks
Yes.
and cause you to think, okay, what did I say?
Mhm.
How did I treat this person? Knowing what I know now, do I feel justified in doing what I did or saying what I said?
Right.
And so I think that it's so helpful to kind of beat back the initial emotional response and stop and just like understand that the other person on the other end, even though maybe they're hiding behind an anonymous, profile picture of a cat, who are they? What are they going through?
Yeah.
We don't know. So by default, we should be treating them with kindness and respect where we can,
Absolutely. And I think that was a good point too, is do we take a minute? Because usually in the comment section, if you are hitting, the reply button, you're not actually replying and responding, you're reacting. There should be a react button.
Yeah.
Like within the first hour of posting, it's only react buttons. But truly, if we let feelings settle and we give it a day, every single comment on a post or every criticism someone makes about the church doesn't have to be responded to immediately. That's an emotional reaction we give within those first few seconds. And so can we wait? Can we let the emotion settle? And can we respond rather than react?
Mm-hmm. And I think that another one of the consequences of not being a particularly well-liked religious group,
Yeah.
not trying to harp on the persecution complex,
Yes.
right? But just looking at the data,
Yeah.
I think that one of the consequences of that data is that a lot of Latter-day Saints feel like they are in a perpetually defensive posture, where and when you're in that posture for long enough, everything starts to feel like an attack, even if it's not intended to be sometimes. And being in that defensive posture, I think just compounds the opposition fatigue and the burnout, right? Because it's never going to go away.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, 25% of people in the United States, that's a lot of people.
That's a lot of them.
And a lot of people want to be heard about religious topics, right? So we get stuck sometimes in this perpetually defensive posture. I feel like I've been there personally for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
I think I'm starting to creep out of it
a
little bit, which I'm actually really excited about. I grew up in Oregon, where I was part of a minority faith.
Same.
Right?
I grew up in Southern California.
Okay.
Same thing.
And so people would ask questions and, I felt like I needed to be the person to give them an answer.
Yeah.
And I felt like I needed to justify my position. And I needed to make them understand that what I believe is logical and reasonable. But I feel like now, after I've been in that mindset for a long time, I'm starting to get to this point where, like, I just don't care anymore. And I wish there was a more eloquent way of stating that, but like a position where I don't feel like I need to convince people.
Right.
Like, I believe what I believe, and if you don't believe it, that's fine. I'm going to keep believing it because it resonates with me. And that was one of the reasons I wanted to bring you on, is because I feel like you've been in that better mindset for a long time.
Yeah.
Was it a process for you to like get to the point where you were okay with just kind of letting the comments go?
Absolutely. When I got on the internet, I assumed I would be the creator that everyone, if they didn't like, they at least respected. And those hopes were dashed within a week. I'm a people pleaser, youngest child. I just want everybody to like me. And I'm at the point now where if a post starts getting tons of hate, I know I'm doing something right. I'm like, oh, Satan doesn't like this one. It's almost exciting for me, as long as it's not, members of the church being like, wow, this was a terrible post. If it's more of I'm getting anger from people who already dislike the church, I know I'm doing it right. And so there is a process of getting used to being disliked by people and not respected by people, and just focusing on the one person whose respect you really care about.
In the comment sections, there are some people who just aren't going to like you, no matter what you do or what you say.
Well, and I'll say, especially in short form areas of the internet,
which is everywhere.
Well,
I mean, not
shortest
everywhere,
form, I'll say. So when I do my podcast or when I do YouTube videos, people have to invest about 10 minutes of their time to hear what I have to say. And I find the people who are willing to invest 10 minutes are generally kinder. I find that the shorter form, when I do a 1-minute reel, it's very easy for someone to watch that and criticize immediately.
Yeah. Well, I think that touches on one of the other questions I wanted to ask, because I think that, facing the reality of the data, when we're sharing the gospel online, which is a very strongly encouraged thing in our faith, go share the gospel, right? I think that we can experience a lot of burnout. I think that just the volume of the opposition can get to people, can get to Latter-day Saints. And so I wanted to pick your brain on what you would prescribe for the opposition fatigue that Latter-day Saints can experience as they try to share the gospel online.
Well, here's what Dr. Kristen would prescribe.
Yes.
So I still very vividly remember a Friday night. Friday is pizza and a movie night in my home. And we, every single Friday, go down in the basement, watch a movie, eat pizza. It's great. And on one of these Friday nights, just before we went into the basement, I went onto my most recent Instagram post and found so many negative comments on it. And so I brought my phone with me down into the basement. And while everyone else is watching the movie, I'm trying to reply to every single comment. And it gets to the point where my family's like, you're ruining the feeling, the moment. Can you stop? And I'm like, no, I've got to keep doing this. And so I go upstairs. I missed the entire movie trying to reply to and defend myself against all of these critics. And at that point, as everybody's going to bed and I haven't had that time with them that's so precious to me, I realize this is not worth it. My family can't be the thing that is sacrificed in my effort to defend the gospel. And at that point, I decided I'm not going to. I'm going to post truth, and I quadruple check my posts now. That is one thing I've learned, is when I am presenting facts, I have it looked over at least 4 times by 4 different sets of eyeballs, and then I present it and I don't defend myself once it's up. I will look for the first hour, comment to a few people. And if I recently did a post where someone who's very popular in the church kind of, I don't know how to properly say it, but fringe part of the church, is that an appropriate way to say it? Made a comment that I knew a lot of people would gravitate toward. And so I commented on that one, and then I left it alone and I let the comment section have at it. And I think in order to avoid opposition fatigue, we have to stop feeling opposed. The comment section will do what it's going to do. I don't have to live in it. This is my corner of the internet. I post what I want to post, and then you all have fun if you want to start attacking the church, but I'm not going to try and defend it, because it can defend itself. It's done a great job of defending itself because it's true. It doesn't need me to prove it to anybody.
Any other tips about opposition fatigue?
I think sometimes we can be our own greatest opposition. I don't think that Satan's living in my head saying negative things, but I think that our own brains can sometimes work against us, and that Satan can take advantage of that negativity. I actually was recently doing an exercise where I was writing out all my doubts and like where those doubts had come from. And I was like, oh, this one came from my sister growing up, and this one came from that comment someone said. 99% of my doubts were from things I'd said to myself or I believed about myself. And so And I have to say this, the thing that keeps me going every day, my mission every day, is I wake up in the morning and I want to disturb and annoy Satan as much as possible. I know that's a dangerous place to be, but that's my goal every day. Is I, like Joseph Smith, who knew that he was destined to be a disturber and annoyer of the kingdom, I'm like, that's going to be me. And so if I want to do that, if I want to fulfill that mission, you started, everyone started in the premortal world. We are all warriors who fought for the right to be here. And if we want to continue that mission, we've got to wake up in the morning ready to disturb and annoy Satan and to do it even if it scares us. And so I would say if you've got doubts and you've got fears, do it anyway. Disturb and annoy the crud out of Satan because it makes Jesus's day. And so I would just say, harness that warrior spirit that you came to this earth with because you fought for the right to be here and you need to keep on fighting.
I love that. And I think part of that is preparedness and kind of expecting the battle.
Oh, yeah.
And that doesn't mean, go out there and get in people's faces and, shove the gospel down their throats, right? But it means, okay, I'm going to post this. This is something that I learned pretty quickly on social media was if you post pretty much anything about Joseph Smith, lightning rod, right? So, but if you go into it knowing what to expect, like if I post this, some people are not going to be happy about it, right? But if you know that beforehand, then when it happens, it's not as big a deal because you expected it, right? Even outside of the church, I'm thinking of the DARE program.
Oh, yeah.
The anti-drug campaign that they had for a long time. I assume they still have it. But it was like one thing that they taught us was you need to decide now how you're going to respond when someone offers you drugs or whatever. Yeah. And in a church context, it was like, the law of chastity. When these temptations come up, you already need to have made the decision of how you're going to respond. And so I think that it's helpful to make the decision before you post something of how you're going to respond when the opposition comes. And hopefully that response is, understanding and kind and but also not, being a pushover. You can stand up for your beliefs, right? You can share truth.
Well, and there's a block and delete option on Instagram for a reason.
There absolutely is. Yes. And I fully support blocking people if you need to.
Yeah.
It can be helpful for you and it can be helpful for them too. Yeah. And another interesting thing that I've noticed is that you had talked about how you pay a lot more attention to the negative comments, right?
Yeah.
And I think that that's a social phenomenon that YouTube and Instagram, I think that these social media algorithms harness that. I saw a video the other day of someone going to the comments section on a post, and the comments that came up for them were totally different on their phone than their friend who went on the same post and looked at the comments.
Oh, that's interesting.
So these platforms will pick comments that they think will get a reaction from you.
Oh my.
And put those at the top of the list so you see them first. And I think this happened on a recent post of mine. It gained some traction and most of the comments were really positive. Right. I was very surprised at how positive the comments were when I would scroll through all of them. But then when I would come back later and just open them, all of the negative comments or controversial comments were the ones that showed up at the top of my comments feed. And so that we have to be careful about that because that can skew things quite a bit, skew our perception of how, people are seeing us and whatnot. So what can Latter-day Saints do to more quickly progress to get to that spot where they are confident and secure in their beliefs and not hurt or they don't prickle when people disagree with them or come at them?
I think one of the things that is really hard about when someone does honestly ask you questions is, like you said, feeling like I have to have the answer. And so when we feel like we need to have the answers and we don't have them, it almost builds up this feeling of frustration and anger because you're making me feel stupid and why don't I know this? And why didn't anybody ever teach that to me? And one of the things I love is if you watch President Hinckley, he did a lot of public interviews. He did more interviews like 60 Minutes, things like that, where he got hard questions. And one of the things I loved about him was that often he wouldn't answer the question they asked. He would answer the question they should have asked. And so if you're asking me about why do I pay tithing, your question isn't really about tithing. It's about, is there a living prophet on the earth who receives revelation from God and that revelation came from him. And so if you ask me about where does my tithing go, I'm not going to answer your question about tithing. I'm going to say, I believe that we have a prophet of God on the earth today and that God speaks through him to me. And I've gained a testimony that tithing is what God wants me to do. Done. I don't have to know where my tithing money went. And so I think that is such a helpful thing for us as members to do, is stop feeling like we need all the answers. The answers are our testimony. We answer the question they should have asked. And those questions go back to the basics that we all learned in primary.
The thought that just came to my mind was, we don't need to crowdsource our beliefs.
Yeah.
And I think that one thing that we need to remember is that there's always going to be opposition no matter what we believe. Like, there are so many voices out there pulling you in different directions.
Yeah.
You might as well go with what you feel is best.
Right.
You know? And it reminds me of Lehi's dream, honestly, when there are just so many voices yelling at you from across the river.
Yeah.
You know, are you going to heed them or heed them not?
Yeah.
To use the kind of the phraseology that they use in the Book of Mormon. And it says in the Book of Mormon that the people who reached the tree of life were those who heeded them not. So I think that we need to ask ourselves, what does that look like for us? Like, what does heeding them not look like? How do we do it? So we've talked a lot about the depressing statistics and things like that. But I also want to focus on the good stuff, right? And one thing that for me has been helpful with opposition fatigue is community, right? Particularly as an LDS content creator. If you went back in time 10 years, there were a lot fewer of us out there. Actually, I wouldn't have even been in that category 10 years ago.
Yeah.
But there's been this, despite the opposition, there's been a boom in Latter-day Saint content creators. And I'm assuming along that same vein, just people that are more open about sharing their beliefs online.
Yeah.
What has your experience been with the Latter-day Saint community online as you've kind of progressed as a content creator?
It's actually interesting because I feel like as I create online, maybe it's just my brain. I don't know if yours works this way, but I am wired to notice the negative much more than I notice the positive. And so I've actually had to make it a habit. Every day I start a new list where it's my receiving list. What kind words, what blessings, what good things did I receive today? And when I get a nice email or a nice comment, I write them down. And I've been shocked ever since I did that. I used to think, man, people are just not very supportive. Like, you know, you put out all this good in the world and all you hear is the negative. Well, it's because that's what my eyes were focused on. I was looking for the negative, and so that's why I found it. But as soon as I started making these little receiving lists, I started realizing there are kind people and good people and grateful people out there. We just have to remember to listen to their voices more than the negative ones. And so that receiving list has helped me see that there is an entire community of Latter-day Saint people who are desperate for someone to say what they're thinking, but are a little worried about saying it online. And they are so grateful when someone is bold enough to say it. And that has been the greatest thing. When someone comments and they're like, this is exactly what I was thinking and didn't know how to say, I'm like, awesome. And that goes on my receiving list. And so I think there is a wonderful community out there. You just have to listen to them, appreciate when they actually say thank you and when they respond, because they're there and they're happy for someone to be creating good content.
Yeah. And I think that I'm going to be totally transparent.
Go.
I want people that are watching, if you have been thinking about like trying out the Latter-day Saint content creation thing, like if that's something that's been on your radar that you've been thinking about, try it out. It's going to be hard because there is going to be that opposition, but there's a community of like-minded people out there that are there to support you and help you and answer your questions and give you, feedback when you need it. Anyway, thank you for being here, Kristen.
I am so happy to have been here.
This has been fantastic. I am supremely depressed by the PEW Research survey that came out.
I actually think it's great.
You do?
What percentage of Israelites like Jesus? What percentage of the people in Jerusalem thought he was great? I bet less than 25%. I think that means we're in pretty great company.
That's a fair point, but everybody wants people to like them.
Yeah, it's true.
When we love the gospel so much, it hurts a little bit. It stings a little bit when, people don't see the same thing that we see.
It's true.
But the thing is they are allowed to feel that way. You know, if God allows them their agency to make that decision, we got to respect it too. And
and I think it goes back to that first question you asked me about that research. And I think it goes to the same answer. Just be a good person. Don't be a jerk. Be a really nice person in person and online, and let the gospel defend itself. You can say facts, but you don't have to defend the church because it's true.
Love that. I don't think there's anything else I need to say. Thank you.
Amen.
This has been fantastic.
Thank you.
To everyone watching, let us know what you thought about this conversation. Let us know what you thought about that Pew Research survey as well. I'm interested in seeing your thoughts. And while you're here, you might as well go watch this video that's popping up on the screen. We'll see you next time.